Welcome to Everything You Need is Inside. My guest today is Rachel Gibler of the It's Fucking Spiritual brand podcast, all things It's Fucking Spiritual, which to me is just makes me smile because isn't it all fucking spiritual? Like everything?
Yes.
Yeah, so thank you so much for being here. I was so excited when you said yes to my request because in a very short amount of time, I've found such a deep, joy around what you share and just such a deep respect for the glimmers of wisdom and the journey that you've gone on so that you can share those glimmers.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's definitely felt in alignment and I'm super excited to dive in today.
Me too. So let's dive in. How did you become fucking spiritual?
Oh, I love this question. So to answer this in the shortest way possible, I think I always say it's to understand where I am now, it's really imperative to understand where I came from and where I was. Mm-hmm. So I'll share the Cliff Notes version of my story. And I grew up with a really beautiful family. I'm super fortunate, small family. I'm an only child to two amazing parents that were together from the age of 13. And on the outside, it looked like I had it all. And in many ways, I very much did until the age of 16 when my entire life came crashing down and my father was killed in a freak accident. And a lot of things transpired after that eventually kind of left me on my own as a 17-year-old and a senior in high school. And at this point, I wasn't raised religiously. I didn't have any sort of spiritual belief system, no belief outside of myself. So I really believe that contributed to the kind of downward spiral that I had for the next 8 years. And I found myself just really abusing drugs and alcohol, got into abusive relationships, was making really poor decisions, was just trying to numb myself from the trauma that had happened in this really abrupt life circumstance that I found myself in. And by the time I was age 23, I was working a corporate job that I hated, 80 hours a week for someone else, making $30K right out of school. Yeah. And my hair was falling out. I was blacking out on the weekends. I was a little bit overweight. I just didn't feel good in my body, in my life at all. And I had no self-esteem or self-worth because I had spent 8 years just trashing myself and speaking down to myself. But I also had this little voice inside of me that gave me a glimmer of hope in moments. And I'm sure people listening to this really resonate with that feeling of you might be beaten down by life and things are happening or you're not, making the best decisions for yourself, but you have this knowing inside, this won't be all for nothing. And I'd have that glimmer of hope in moments. And when I was 23, in the middle of that job, I was crying on my lunch break one day in my car and I cried out, please just let time stop so I could think. I want to do something with my story. I want to help people. I want to heal myself. But what do? I have no time. Right? And your wish is my command, the universe. I imagine the universe was laughing at this point because a week later I was in my own freak accident and I shattered my leg and I was forced to take 3 months medical leave. And at this time I was pissed. I was angry. I'm are you kidding? One more thing. All these bad things always happen. And 2 weeks into my recovery, cast from my hip to my ankle, laying in bed, moved back in with my mom, couldn't care for myself. And I had this knowing, that voice, and it said, use this time wisely, and this won't be all for nothing. And I knew in that moment that one day I'd be sitting here telling this story from the other side, saying that was the moment and the first step in changing my life. And so I grabbed my computer, I Googled how to be happy, and I found self-development. And I spent 3 months in bed studying all of that and now have dedicated my life to it for the past 5 years.
I mean, that's beautiful.
Thank you. So that's the story.
And so sweet as a 23-year-old that you Googled how to be happy.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
I know. I love that part of the story. And I think it's imperative for people to hear that because you can look at you or me or anyone that you look up to, especially in the self-development space, and think that people have it all together. And it's well, how do I go from broken or in an abusive relationship, drug and alcohol, all of these things or whatever circumstance it is, how do I go from here to there? And it feels like there's this big gap.
Right.
And I love telling that piece because I didn't know where to go.
Right.
I didn't know what to do. That's what I started with. I started right where my feet were.
Right.
And it built on itself from there into the brand and the business and the impact that the brand has today.
It's amazing. Yeah. And I think that's like the whole point is like, you can only be where you are.
Yeah.
So start where you are.
Yeah.
And so given that you started where you were as this 23-year-old and you talk about like potentially like abusive relationship, and I've heard you speak about, your relationship with your father prior to his death, and like this expectation of you to be like the good girl and to, be zipped up and quiet and pretty and not make that much noise.
Yeah.
Which, I wonder, is that what potentially led you down this path beyond your father's passing, which is so traumatic and tragic, but like finding these ways to numb out? Like, what was the impetus first to numb out? And then when you figured out how to be happy, what was like the next step to be happy?
Yeah. So I think really I was led by wanting to rebel against the good girl archetype, which is what actually caused me to make a lot of the decisions. And I think I wanted attention from my mom. I wanted people to know I wasn't okay. Like, that's a lot of where the acting out had come from. And I think for so many of us that make decisions that maybe on the surface don't look good, right? Like, they're not decisions that are fruitful for our life, but they come from often a very, a place of trying to help us, right? I was never bad intentioned. I just didn't know what to do with my displaced emotion, and it came out sideways. And so whether that was from my father's death, whether that was from years even leading up before his death, I always felt slightly stifled because I'm loud. I fuck in the name of my brand, So it's like I always had this edginess to me that I never allowed to be fully expressed. So I think that it was a culmination of a lot of those things that ended me up a college student, 18, 19, 20 years old, in this really like acting out phase.
Right.
But to answer your second question, as far as what was the next step of finding after I Googled how to be happy, I think it's really important to note when I made the decision to change my life, it wasn't like I made this decision, I found this work, all of a sudden I'm in it and it's great and, I've changed my life. It's been it's a constant becoming still to this day. And I don't know if that ever ends, right? Because what I've learned on the journey now is that we can't heal our way out of our humanness. We only learn how to transmute and transform it. And we still get to feel all of those emotions, which that's something I've really learned on the journey as I have become more successful, is that you can't do that. Right? We can't heal our way out of the human condition. But the first step of what I did was I really cultivated an awareness of what it was I wanted to change, which at that point, laying in bed was pretty much everything.
Right.
So it was, I decided to get sober and not take all of the painkillers that they gave me. Obviously, I wasn't going out to bars and drinking, so that was a helpful piece of that. I ripped the Band-Aid and decided to not hang out with the party friends that I had anymore, and I made the decision and knew I'm going to be alone, and it's going to be okay, and it's going to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I spent months and months alone by myself before I started joining groups and getting involved in people that did, and thought in the ways that I wanted, right? Yeah. So I started joining entrepreneur groups. I started getting out there. I started doing different things. And ultimately, I think the path to change is simply just having the willingness to make a different decision. And so I just started making different decisions.
Yeah.
Compounded.
Right. And then committing to it. I think that's so bold as a 23-year-old to decide that you were no longer going to hang out with these people, do these things, because, it's like, that is always going to beckon you, like, come play. And I find even like in my adulthood, right, like through my own healing journey, that as I've evolved and shifted, there's people in my life, people start to drop off.
Yeah.
But then when you show up because you're lonely or you want to, have a social plan, it's like there's this feeling I get of like, come to the dark side.
Yeah.
Like come, and like that temptation. And I'll think about it like, And then I'm like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
And, not to be so polarizing, but at the same time, that's okay. Like really needing to cut out certain people from life who are no longer serving you, you know, and it comes with heartbreak short term, but in the long term, there's massive healing. And the healing isn't, I think, an evolution on and on.
Oh, absolutely. And I think I love that you brought that up because I'm so honest. We were talking about this before we started filming. It's like, I feel like I'm almost too honest. I have a pull to the darkness. I mean, I wouldn't have gone through what I went through if I didn't have that in me, that thread in me. And I think so many of us do. And it wasn't like I flipped the switch and all of a sudden I'm this different person. Sometimes for a couple years even before my life really took off in the past couple years, for the first 2-3 years of the journey, it was I made the right decision. And then I'd be 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And then it was 2 steps forward again and 1 step back. So I think it's also really important to hear that the journey is not linear. And just because you don't make the perfect, most aligned decision every single time doesn't mean you're bad, wrong, broken, something's wrong with you. You're destined to not have the greatness that you feel within you. It's simply a journey in cultivating compassion for yourself.
Right.
You're not going to suddenly change everything.
And I so believe that self-forgiveness of okay, so you slipped up or you decided something else that you didn't think you were going to decide, and you get back up and you find your feet again and you keep moving. Yeah. And I love that you said that you are attracted to the darkness. I've made such close friends with the darkness because it's where I lived for so long. And now as I've stepped into light and, wear flowers, I've always worn flowers, but as a reminder, but the darkness lures me. The type of man I'll be attracted to, or something I'll look twice at. Yeah. I find that I'm attracted to it because it's dark. Yeah. And then I have to check myself and be like, okay, Olivia, stand down. We know why you like that, but that's not for you. Yeah. And just that constant reminder of at least being conscious enough of why and what the pattern is so you can sort of just counter correct for the moment.
100%. It's so interesting. I really find myself in the same, either whether that's men or there's just certain things where I'm I'm going to play with fire a little bit and go down that route and see, how long it takes me to get burned. And I used to do that a lot. And as I've increased my own self-worth and my own awareness, even if I have that pull, I can know to pause, not judge myself, and make a different decision consciously than I maybe would have before. And it's just that constant path of coming back to awareness and then the truth of what's actually meant for you.
Completely. And I mean, that constant check-in of you good, you here, you trigger, is something triggering you, or are you feeling lonely or needy? And so you're, sort of attracting that energy that needs to be needed, or that narcissistic sort of, I literally, my body responds to different experiences differently, just from far away. And I actually just have to come back home. We're good, we're safe, you're okay. Yeah,
yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really important, to know that in this journey, I had a friend recently, actually, who she has been in various, like all of us, right, have been in certain patterns over and over again. And she had been in this relationship for a couple of years. I've been really close with her through it, helped her get out of it. And recently she met another guy, because often, and myself included, we meet the same people in a different package, right? It's
new costume.
You are the common denominator. You're the bottom line, right? And she got into a relationship with this guy in a very similar way. I had given her, my feedback of hey, this is, as a friend, this is similar. And she ended it after a couple of months. And she had actually come to me and been honest with me and said, I've been avoiding you for a couple of months because I knew you were right. And I was like, girl, but the thing is, you went from 2 years to 2 months.
The bounce back.
This is a win. Yeah. That's a win. And for all of us, myself included, it's we have to look at not, oh my God, I repeated the same pattern and now we use that as an excuse to beat ourselves up and down the spiral we go, which creates more of the same issue. Instead, pause and celebrate yourself. I only stayed in that pattern for,
I'm such a
X
high
amount of
five for
time.
that. Yeah. And it's also interesting too, because I've experienced the same thing with friends, because in a way you're providing light.
Yeah.
And if they're in the shadow and they know that there's a self-sabotage there, there's so much shame that they don't want to present themselves to you. And it's sort of like, as you show up, I show up as like, I got you. Like, I love you. Exactly. Whatever you do, like, I'm not here to judge you. I'm here to potentially hold you accountable if you ask.
Right.
But not judge you, because the judgment's already happening internally,
Yeah, 100%. And I'm certainly that friend that I show up and I'm a mirror and I'm honest when asked. And at the same time, I'm surrounded by friends that would do that for me. And I think it's really important. I've learned to surround yourself with people that will hold you in that light and be that mirror and be honest with you. Who I've surrounded myself has changed drastically over the past years, and I'm so fortunate with what I've cultivated now, but it's intentional.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's such a valid point, because I think when you're walking in light, or you're carrying that sort of emotional quotient of being really present and conscious of who you are and where you are, everything around you shifts.
Yeah.
And like the biggest thing I believe is relationships, friendships, how you relate to your family in every, like, which way, to your body, to your environment. And I think that can be very challenging, because as you're shifting and growing and everything around you is shifting and growing and potentially falling off, as you said, like, there was a lot of isolation involved in the time that you really chose to commit to yourself. And I experienced that wholly too. And I think, again, it's this knowing of like, you got this, being your biggest cheerleader in those times, that you're not alone because you have you.
Yeah, it's so important.
So after you started going through this like transition, you're 23, like really devoting yourself to a higher purpose. And then I know that you are also an entrepreneur through like a brick and mortar space, Lash Lounges in Houston. How did we go from 23, injured, bed, Spritual, awakening sort of to that?
Yeah, well, I knew that I wanted to work for myself. I knew I wanted to go on this path of self-development and all of these things. But at the time, I didn't have the confidence to go off and start a business. I didn't have the ability and the skill set and the language to have a coach or to be a coach yet, right? I needed to have a coach first. I needed to be in this world. So I didn't originally get into doing what it is that I do now, which is coaching and facilitating and hosting retreats and podcasting, all the things. Yeah. So I actually had an opportunity to do this with a family. And so I was like, okay, well, I have an opportunity to own and run these businesses and scale them out and do all of that. So that started a few months after I was back in action, right? So I was in bed for 3 months, and then this opportunity presented itself a few months later. And so I went back and quit my corporate job and really started to like run these and scale them out. And I did that for 4 or 5 years. And it really, what I did during that time was I stayed really dedicated to like the self-development and all of that. And I started sharing it. So I started sharing my mindset shifts and what I was going through. And I documented the entire journey. So now online, I have this beautiful community of so many human beings. And many of them have been with me from the very beginning. And I just focused on giving and sharing online with no agenda. I didn't sell anything to anybody. I just shared from the heart what I was going through and what it looked like to, open these salons. And I had one, and then that turned into 2. And at one point, I think the max, I had 20 employees. And it was a beautiful experience. But as I continued on the journey, I really gained confidence. I spent 3 years just honing my skills, getting certifications behind the scenes. I would work at my front desk at my salon and be in certification for what it is that I do now, not knowing how it would unfold. And nearly about a year and a half, nearly 2 years ago now, is when I launched the It's Fucking Spritual brand. And when that took off, I realized I had really found my purpose, and I walked away from the salons. So that was kind of the journey with that. Yeah.
So what does it feel like to just find your purpose? Was it a moment? What was it?
It was a bunch of micro moments. So it wasn't like one thing and it's like, boom, this is it. It was following the path that lit me up over and over again, walking into the fire, doing the things scared. And it was really like putting myself in the room, having different conversations, going to events, and then that would illuminate something, right? And it's like, oh, I really knew that I wanted to make people create a space where people could feel seen, heard, and not alone. And as I walked the path of being in so many of these spaces, it illuminated things that I loved and also ways that I felt I was different. And I got to this point a couple years ago where I realized, I've been deep in this work for about 3 years, and I've been in a lot of spaces. I've manifested a lot of things, and yet I don't feel like I found my place in the spiritual community. And at first it was self-development. I had gotten in from a very masculine mindset, like goals, set your goals, think positive, say affirmations, right? Like reverse engineer. I had gotten into that world first. As mind you, I was atheist, or I considered myself atheist my whole life. And then in 2020 was when I had my first like really big spiritual awakening. And then I got really into more of the esoteric, the quantum physics, the explanation for why we're all here, like all of that very woo-woo kind of concept. And I realized there was this gap where I wasn't like super buttoned up mindset person. I was like, I'm still messy and human, and like I curse, and and then with the spiritual side, I wasn't this like really airy, very woo-woo kind of person. I questioned the woo, and I wanted a scientific explanation, and I was constantly asking why and testing, like, oh, I should ask for a sign from the universe. Okay, like, I would almost do it from this rebellious place. And that's how I ended up kind of almost creating my spirituality, was proving it and constantly proving myself wrong.
Right.
That I created a natural wonder for the world. But what I didn't see was these two spaces brought together, broken down in a way that is real, raw, and relatable and honest. And like, it's not all love and light. Like, listen, I haven't figured that out. If someone else has, great, go be in their community. But what about the people that are really messy and human?
Yeah, I mean, life in real time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So then one day I said, I don't know, sometimes it's just fucking spiritual. I was like, hey, I like that.
Yeah.
And it stuck. And then, it turned out I followed my joy, and I created the space online that I wanted to see and be a part of, and turned out other people wanted it too.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I think if you've heard any of that, I think what you need to hear most is show up.
Yeah.
Like, get yourself in the room. Yeah. And even if you're not fully a believer, like, I'm a believer, and a believer, because I've been proven wrong so many times that like, I am held, I am supported, I am seen, I am all of the things that like, there's no way I can't believe.
Exactly.
So, when anyone comes to me and says like, what do you mean magic? Like, what do you mean God? And I look at them and I'm just like, I don't know anything but magic, because I've just been proven wrong so many times that like, to not believe is I think to not even be alive at this point. Like I have such a deep knowing of that there's something so much greater than us that is guiding you even to like the trauma, to like be able to rise from that, like, and to grieve and feel that bottom so that you can find the levity afterwards, like that deep knowing that something else is out there and that's within you, right?
Yeah.
And you sort of pulled that out and you're like, it's fucking spiritual. Like,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I'm still going through a shift and changing, and it's ever evolving and growing and becoming, and it's really taken on a life of its own. But I think to your point, like, I was the same exact way. It got to this point where like, well, I can't not believe in this anymore. I've been proven wrong so many times. And then that opened up like the awe and the wonder. And then I kind of just started to think, the more I got into it, I'm like, how are we not all just walking around every day? Like, where are we?
That's what I do.
Yeah.
I think people are like, what are you doing? Right. And I'm like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Like, Mother Earth created these roses.
Yeah.
Like, how is that not the most beautiful?
It's so cool. And when you find the magic in the mundane and the little moments, it just makes everything so much more fun.
I mean, it's wild.
Yeah.
I was just before this, I was listening to Trevor Hall because I love him and his song Obsidian and, my obsidian crystals. And there was something about me that was like protection. Obsidian is a black crystal and it signifies a protection. Like AirPods in a rush to go to Whole Foods really quickly. And all of a sudden my ex-boyfriend grabs me. And I haven't seen him since we broke up and moved out like 4 months ago. But it was like one of those things of like something in me knew I need to listen to the song, run in really quick, AirPods on. Like I knew I was going to see him.
Yeah.
Like I read a journal entry this morning. It was like whatever it was. And again, in that moment, it was like I had to have my feet on the ground and know that I had protection, like to just, because life is just so surprising like that. And I think it provides tests to us. I always say like the bad guy is like the Bowser in Mario. And like we have to slay the bad guy to get to the next level. Yeah. And that's like the up level in us so that the energy shifts and then we're brought to like another opportunity, right? Or into another room. But like that magic that happened earlier, even though it was like a little bit of dark magic and a surprise, it was like, I was protected. Like I was okay. Yeah. You know? So like small things like that, I think just remind you how alive you are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So. Oh, that's a good example. I love that. It's like you knew.
Yeah.
And there's so many experiences where it's like you couldn't have known something and you were guided to do. So if we learn to cultivate a relationship with that inner voice and that intuition, and a big part of my journey has been learning not to question it because I didn't trust myself for so long that I didn't trust my intuition.
Right.
And I've come to really learn that actually like I have the strongest intuition. Nobody knows the answer better than you know the answer. And I've learned that so much, even being in these spaces and being in the spaces I'm in now, which I'm really fortunate to have the connections I do and the mentors and the friends and so many of my friends now are people that I once followed and looked up to. And we tend to like pedestalize people, especially in this industry, and think like, this coach has the answer, this mentor has the answer, this room that I'm going to get in. While you can be given perspective shifts that is really powerful, you also always have the answers inside of you. And if you learn how to cultivate that and trust it and act on it, you'll be surprised and the whole world will open up to you.
Totally. I think that was the impetus or is the impetus for this podcast and everything I've sort of done and built thus far. This idea of like everything you need is inside. And I was saying that phrase before I even knew what it meant. Yeah. And then it was like all of a sudden like tools, answers, like emotions, people, everything we need is literally inside. And I think you can also like not dumb it down, but baseline like what to eat, what to wear, you know, like where to go, who to surround yourself with. Like your body is constantly giving you signals of like lean in or lean back. Yeah. Like eat the salad, like that's from your head. Right. Like your body might just really need protein. Like sounds so basic, but our bodies know how to feed ourselves. So like all the diet things that you follow, like be careful. Yeah. Like really be careful who you're seeking advice from, because ultimately like you are your own, you know, sovereign king, queen, human. Yeah. And I think that's something that sometimes gets bypassed in the spiritual world because we cling to the end all when like really we are the end all. Like we have everything we need. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah, 100%. And to your point, the like what to eat, what to wear, and bringing in the element of magic that we just talked about. It's like if people just slow down enough to listen, it gets fun. Not what should you wear. Check in. What do you want to wear? Right. What would feel good? What's fun? What do you want to embody? Like this is a video game. Pick your character, baby. I don't know. Like it's just fun, right? And so if you slow down enough to like really begin to listen and see and follow it, every decision can be magic. Totally.
And with an element of love, like this self-trust, this self-love. Like you can't trust another if you don't trust yourself. You can't love another, I believe, until you really like start to really understand and love yourself. Like this vessel that we live in, like the meat suit is just the outer covering, but like that soul, that spirit, it's constantly feeding us messages. And so often the messages, because we've come from a place of pain or conditioning, are like not good enough, like not pretty enough, not skinny enough, not successful enough, whatever it is. And that reprogramming, I think when you start to step into yourself is like this liberation, this freedom, and that's when the magic begins, because that's when you start to hear the magic, because you start hearing yourself from a clear lens. Yeah. So with that clear lens, I want to go into the darkness for a second. Yeah. This word trauma that I know you speak about, and that your trailer for your podcast is a whole trigger warning. What did that look like in your life? How did it show up?
Trauma?
Very broad question. But when you talk about like working through it, was it relationship or relationship with the masculine because of potentially a relationship with your dad? Was it trauma through relationships, romantic relationships?
Yeah, well, so trauma, I mean, showed up as a result of, right, there's big T trauma, which would look like the accident that my father is in and losing him suddenly. Big T trauma is the abusive relationship. It's the drug and alcohol abuse, the way I abuse my body. All of those things are big T trauma, and many people have them. And then there's also little T trauma that there's so many people that I hear will say, like, well, I haven't had anything really big and bad happen in my life. Like, I've been really fortunate. So, like, I don't really need to do the inner child healing, or I don't really need to, I don't need all the self-development stuff. It's like, it's actually for everyone. If you are alive, you have had some form of trauma. That even can be the little kid in the 3rd grade on the playground that made fun of your hair, and you have no idea why you have to always dye your hair, and right, you have no idea why these things come out sideways, but they're stored inside of your subconscious. And so it can come out sideways for any and everyone. It's the framework for why we do what we do and the way that we act in the world are programming. So every single human being has a program, has a software program. And it's a result of big T and little T trauma, or some type of combination of the two. And it can come out in many different ways. For me, it was drug and alcohol abuse. And then that addiction turned into a work addiction, and then it turned into a doing the work addiction. So there's all these things that it can come out sideways. Anything that you're doing to escape, being still with yourself. If you aren't able to be still with yourself, you got to be scrolling. If you got to be on Netflix, if you got to, be eating the bag of Cheetos and you can't seem to stop yourself. No judgment. Do not judge yourself for that, but understand and have an awareness that that is trauma, essentially, and programming playing itself out and running on a loop. And so the healing of that has happened in layers. It was first, that healing was mindset and journaling and meditation and learning how to be on my own. And then in recent years, and I think I mentioned this to you before we started filming, I got a lot of the stuff on my vision board I wanted. I made a lot of the money I wanted. I had a lot of the success. I got a lot of the things. I got the house. And I didn't even realize that my previous addictions with the drug and alcohol and the way I was acting then were displaced into, now I'm going to do the work, I'm going to achieve, and I'm going to help people, and it was a better outlet. But I realized this actually a year ago. I'm still on the journey. I document my life in the journey. That's the point, right? It's not that I'm presenting as someone who's arrived, right? It's more about sharing the story. And a year ago, I found myself swimming in the sea of success that I had created, and actually felt very empty because I realized it wasn't the ticket. It wasn't the key to what I was really looking for. And what I was truly looking for was a connection to myself and my body, and just really me all along. And so now my next layer of my healing journey has all been somatic. So now it's been somatic work. It's been healing trauma in my nervous system and in my body. And that has transformed me more than anything.
I mean, it is all in the body. I mean, it's everywhere, but the way that it shows up can be varied, but I so believe that, I mean, I know you're familiar with the body keeps the score, I'm sure. But really it's like the way that we lean in or pull back and everything, the way that we relate to everything, our body is constantly reminding us. And I think that it's so powerful that you found somatic work, because similar to my experience, it's like the way that we carry ourselves, or the pains that we feel in our shoulders, or our inabilities to sleep at some points, or our bodies just know, like the way we carry ourselves in every way. So I think that's probably why my healing journey started with like yoga at 15 or boxing at 20. It was, I had to get this emotion out of my body. I had to put it somewhere, this anxiety, this fear, this anger. And I'm so glad that I did. And now, years later, just like hearing other people's experience with coming back home is, I believe, beyond finding the magic all around us, but like coming back home is the most impactful I think, place. It's the only place we can be, you know? And it's not about what's around us. It's really about what's inside of us. Yeah. And so kudos to doing that work. And when you say somatic, just so people understand more, is it like breath work? Is it body work? Is it?
All of the above. Okay. And I'm still on the journey too. I'm still discovering and finding different modalities and things like that. But the soma, for those that don't know, the soma is another word for the body. And so when we go through traumatic experiences, we hold that trauma inside ourselves, inside the body, inside the nervous system. And so our nervous system can be stuck in a fight or flight or freeze response. And I didn't realize that I was doing thought work, yes, working through limiting beliefs, yes, reprogramming my subconscious mind, but a lot of it was still stored inside of my nervous system. So I originally got introduced through breath work, and I'm a breath work facilitator now, and facilitate that at my retreats and all the things, and it's very powerful. And that in and of itself has had me remember repressed memories. It's had me dislodge emotion. And I've found a lot of times actually doing this work, my mind will be blank, but my body will be sweating. And it looks like you're in a ayahuasca ceremony. I've never done ayahuasca, but I would imagine it would be similar to that.
She is just the powerful.
Shaking. Yeah. The shaking, the releasing, the physical, manifestation of letting go. And I'm always constantly looking for new things. My newest thing that I'm doing is I'm going to a nervous system chiropractor. 4 days a week. I was there this morning.
Is this the one that's short sessions and that like tables and you're next to people?
I'm not next to anybody.
Okay.
But they're 15 minutes.
Okay, I've heard about this.
They scanned my nervous system and found where my nervous system was holding onto tension. And disclaimer, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a chiropractor, but from what I understand of what he's told me is that like when our bones get out of alignment, a lot of times they're cracking them back into place, but then you're constantly having to go right back to the doctor. This happens a lot with Western medicine. It's like having to go back to fix it again and again because we're not getting to the root cause. And we can say that for anything, any ailment, anything in the mind. If we're not getting to the root, it's going to grow back, right? Bigger, right? Until you're really able to shift it. And so, he basically turns back on with different pressure points my nervous system because the muscles contracted because of something that's held inside the body through trauma and stress, which is through your thoughts, through toxins, or through trauma. So I'm on a whole other...
I have people for you.
Yeah, okay, beautiful.
I recently had a bodywork session and the woman, she was caught, like I call it my right wing, and it's like mother, brother, uncle, and I have like a very, very intense trauma with an uncle that's deceased, and the energy was so heavy in my shoulder, she was like pushing it, and my body was contracting, and finally she got it out, and like I started wailing for my 6-year-old self, and it was the energy was so intense, she started screaming, "Get out of here!" You're like, because the whole room filled up with this incredible, so like this idea of like, and then she turned me over and I couldn't swallow. Like it was the energy just like shifted to this stuck place. But like you said, if we don't release it, it stays there and it gets bigger, and like the voice and the back and the shoulder, and like we can't expand. And it was, and another woman I work with who's incredible, she uses,
information.
So I've been training in Andean shamanism because it's where my healer is based. And in the Andes, they don't use plant medicine because it's all energy, because there's no plants in the mountains, right? So it's all about people and interaction and how we interact. So using our hands, energy, but not Reiki. Her background's in neurophysics and energy from like a shamanistic perspective. She puts you in your subconscious with the breath, and literally, like I have complete memories as much as plant medicine ceremonies. So I think a testament to magic you got here, and all these people sort of like either through referral, but like showed up.
Right.
It was the same, like I called in people just like help me, hold me, heal me. And I think when you open up to that, if you're in a space where you're looking for some sort of help, when you open up to those experiences, they will fall into you. Yeah. They will just show up for you. And I think it's about that like deep knowing, deep belief, and asking for what you need, like from the ether, if you will, or in your journal. So before we wrap up, with that said, what would you tell your younger self?
I love this question. There's so many things I could say.
Yeah.
But keep going. it gets better. Like follow follow it.
Yeah.
And don't be so hard on yourself. A lot of people need to hear that.
Yeah.
Myself included still.
Constantly. Some days constantly you're just like at every reminder of like, you're doing great, Bill. Like, yeah. And so to the person 23, 43, 83, laying in bed, wanting to find their feet and feeling so stuck, what would you tell them?
You know what to do.
I love that. It's just like in shamanism, your dharma, it's called your Inca seed, and it's your soul's purpose. And you just spoke to my soul's purpose. You know what to do. Trust yourself. I usually end with, what does everything you need is inside mean to you?
It means exactly that. You already know what to do.
Yeah, that's why I wasn't really going to even ask it, but beautiful.
Exactly.
Rachel Gibler, thank you so much. It has been fucking spiritual. I am so honored to have had this time with you and to learn and to share and to listen and to grow. Like, thank you for all the reminders and the knowledge I didn't yet realize. Yeah, so, is there, how do people find you?
Yeah. You can find me, come hang out on Instagram at Rachel Gibler. I'm sure you will put it in the show notes. Also on Spotify, Apple, It's Fucking Spiritual. Search my podcast. We're about to relaunch season 2, but we've got 111 episodes already for you to hang out and listen to. And come DM me and let me know that you came from this podcast and what your takeaway was. I'm super interactive and love to chat with everyone on there. So definitely let me know.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.